Welcome back to Builders, Makers, Doers. I'm Andy Bassett. He's Elliot Bassett. And we've got with us today Chuck Wiethop, president and founder of Design8 Studios, a really awesome company that we're going to talk about and dive into here in Omaha, Nebraska. So I'm really excited about it, Chuck. And at that, let's build off that. All right, well, Chuck, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, it's exciting to have you on. We've worked with your company for a long time, so it's been fun, me personally, to be able to watch you grow and navigate through all the things that you do owning a business, as we all know, which a lot of our audience can respect. But we always like to kick it off and just kind of give you the opportunity to share a little bit about, the history of Design8, what you guys do, so maybe for the audience, walk through kind of how the company came to be, what the company does, and maybe, how it's changed from day one to as we sit today.
Okay. Well, best way to explain this is we're a sign and graphics company, but we're a very interesting, diverse form of a company. We do consider ourselves in the Midwest to be the most diverse sign company. But the way I basically started was we started like our best way to explain is like a signs by tomorrow, fast signs now type place. We did yard signs and banners, and that was about it. We were the first company. We started in 1995, so 31 years ago.
Wow.
And
time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, it feels like 2 days ago actually. So we were the first company to go out and get a full color outdoor printer. So everybody at that time was either hand painting, using a vinyl cutter machine. And we had those as well, but we went out and got a full color outdoor printer. So what I did is I went to all the sign companies in town and says, hey, I'll print for you. Yeah. And so I started partnering up with other companies. And in essence, I never wanted to call it wholesale, but I call it more of a partnership with the other companies. So we started everything from, back in the day when you did a banner, you'd have to cut 10 different layers of colors and stick them down the banner one at a time. It'd take you 4 or 5 hours to put a banner together. We could just throw a banner material in the printer, print the whole darn thing, and be done with it. Wow. So obviously the costs were a lot less to do that. And so back then they were selling banners for $8.50 a square foot. We would sell them to them for $3 a square foot, and they could turn around and sell them for $8.50 and make great profit off of it. About 2 years into it, everybody started buying printers like we had. So we went out and bought the next size up, basically, so I could still print larger stuff for them. Then they went out and bought a larger printer, so we would go buy a different type of machinery. We bought flatbed printers, CNC routing machines, stuff, anything we could do to still work with these people. And then we started doing outdoor signs, everything from lit signs to dimensional signs. And we started running into the city of Omaha. You have to have what's called a master sign installer license in order to be able to install signs, and there's no test, or it's a very extensive test, but there's no study guide for it at all. And they basically said, learn the code, learn neon code, learn UL code, and learn the electrical code, and then come in and take the test. But the real kicker was the inspector told me that I have to have 3 years experience as a journeyman before I can take the master's test. And I'm like, well, that doesn't help me much because I'd have to go to another sign company that's my competition, ask them to work under them, basically, and that wasn't going to happen.
That's wild.
So, and we're contracting out other sign companies to do installs, and they'd say, yeah, we'll be there tomorrow, and they never show up. And it our hands are getting tied. So luckily, the sign inspector retired, went to the new sign inspector and says, what's going to take my test? He said, come in and take it. And so I took it and failed miserably because I had no clue what was on the test. And most of the stuff I learned from what's on the test was just me working with other, when we contract somebody else, they would explain, hey, you have to do bonding jumpers for neon, whatever, and kind of learned as we went. So then I went back in, took it again, kind of a funny story, failed it again by one question.
Of
and
course.
I'm like, I don't think I failed this. And I said, I want to go. So I asked him, can I come in and look at the test? The test was done. It was actually, they put the test together back in the 80s, early 80s. And so we went through the whole thing, and we were going through the ones I missed, and I'm like, I swear that one's right, because it was basically a big map of the city of Omaha, and it would point out a certain sign, a certain property, and you have to know what zone it was in, what the setbacks were, or what everything was. And the question was the property on the northwest corner. And he was like, no, so you got it wrong because it's this. And I said, that's the northeast corner.
No way.
And he's like, oh.
The test was wrong.
And so for 15 years, the test had been wrong.
Amazing.
And we just, caught it. So passed through. Then ironically, I said, well, could I see my last test I took? Oh, no, we throw those away. So I don't know. I may have passed the first time. I don't know. But so I've always been a real hands-on owner. So I've only had always up until recently 4 or 5 employees was all. Yeah. So I was the one out installing. I was the one building signs and what have you. To back up a little bit, I started the business. I had no experience in the sign industry whatsoever. I was doing management work at Sitel Corporation for a telemarketing company. My degree was in marketing, really wanted a job in marketing, kept on applying for the marketing assistant. They kept on hiring somebody else. So I said, okay, here's my last time. If I don't get it, I'm gonna start this company with a buddy of mine that was working for a sign company, and I didn't get the job. So I framed the rejection letter and started the company.
Ah, nice.
That's 6 months into the business. My partner could not understand why he wasn't a millionaire yet and wanted out. And so I bought him out for $2,000, and we spread over a 2-year period to pay him out, because that's about how much money we made back then. and then about 3 years later, he came back and worked for me for the next 10 years after that.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
So we still got along and everything like that. And then over the years, we just started getting into a lot of different weird, unique type of jobs. And unfortunately, I was kind of stupid. I wasn't afraid to try anything or get into it. I kind of tell people ask me how I get all my knowledge. I say I've made a lot of mistakes. I've screwed up enough stuff to know what not to do and how to do it right. So we, over the years, just turned into this company that whenever another sign company or a printing company we work with gets themselves in a job they shouldn't be into, they say, call Chuck, he'll figure it out. And we join up with them. So I would say about 60% of our business is working with other companies of the trade, and about 40% of our business is when we have some national accounts, some franchise accounts, and then we work with like your contractors for your larger type build out accounts that we get on the bid list. And it took 30 years in business to really get a hold on, to just get the reputation in town. And we don't really have a sales force in the sense where we're going out there and knocking on doors. Enough business comes in from referrals, from repeat clients. Because I always had the opinion, I don't want to go chasing down that pizza place that's going to open up and they're going to order one sign, we'll never see them again. Yeah. I'd rather go talk to the other sign companies, that we know we're going to get consistent work from. And even though we did a little bit lower cost in the long run, we end up with much, much more work in the long run. So we kind of keep in that direction.
Well, and I can attest to those listening that when you mentioned you've done a lot of different things over time, I've watched it between what you just referenced to vehicle wraps, to wall wraps, to all sorts of different signs, to some pretty cool stuff I think we'll get to when we talk about some of your projects. So yeah, it's been fun to watch you kind of navigate through and grow over time. But yeah, thanks for sharing that, because there's a lot there.
Yeah. I'm just curious, take yourself back to when you started the company. You mentioned you had another job, you couldn't get the marketing assistant role, but starting your own company is not an easy feat and makes a lot of people nervous. So just take yourself back to that point in time. I mean, what ultimately, I understand that you didn't get the marketing assistant job, but what kicked you over the edge it's one thing to not get a job over here and go get a job at a different company, but you took the step to just start your own company, which, again, is a big leap for a lot of people. Walk through your thoughts around that.
I was very naive.
It was all rainbows and butterflies.
It's funny how often you hear that stuff.
Honestly, I was young. I was 25 years old. I had no family. I wasn't married, no kids. I had nothing to lose. And I'm not touting myself or patting myself on the back. It takes a very unique person to want to do it and to be stupid enough to stick it out. There's many a times in the first 5 years that I probably should have said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. But and you think when you're starting a business, you're going to be your own boss. You can do whatever you want. You can work whenever you want. Turns out it's the opposite. You have, instead of one boss, I have thousands of bosses, which are all my clients. Yep. And so when you're not working, you're thinking about work. Don't ask me how to not become a workaholic, because I don't know the answer to that, unfortunately.
Which is true. This guy works a lot.
And so, yeah, I figured I was young enough. I had some good support from my grandfather and father that they encouraged me to give it a try, and they co-signed the first loan to get it started and everything like that. And so it was, when I look back at it, it was a good decision. But the one thing I did learn from that as well, which kind of bridges off the subject, but I went to college for 4 years and got a degree. If I knew I was going to do this, I would have went and worked for a company that like this for 4 years, and then jumped into it, because there's so much stuff you do not know from taxes to, I mean, I got fined by the IRS for not turning my payroll taxes in time, and you name it, I did it wrong, and I just learned from that way because there was no real internet back then. You could just get online or ask Chat GPT on how to do this or anything. So.
Well, and I mean, that's a really relevant topic right now for people specifically in the trades, which is a lot of the audience for this pod is, with the cost of your typical 4-year degree right now, and does it necessarily translate to running a business? Certainly one in the trades? No, and so there's a lot of people, I think younger generation right now that are starting to contemplate that when they look at the debt that you're going to have coming out. And if you really don't know what that degree is going to do for you. So it's interesting to hear that was a piece, but maybe a question I've got. So if you say 5 years later, as an example, would you have taken the risk? Do you think?
Probably would have still.
Yeah.
Still wasn't married.
Okay. That's the differentiator right there. Yeah, but it's
probably, it was something I always wanted to do.
Okay.
It was in the back of my mind. Yep. I always wanted to own a business, and I wanted to give it a try. And I can't remember who gave me the advice of what's the worst that's going to happen, and so it wasn't a very difficult decision to make if you get right down to it. Yep. The job I had, I wasn't really enjoying it. Yep. And so I knew I'd be looking for something else eventually. And you hear, even back then, you hear the horror stories of people can't find a job and what do you do? I figure at least I can control that, which ironically, I was a lot more broke for the first 10, 15 years than I would have been if I would have had a job. So.
Sure. But my guess is today, looking back, had you not taking the chance, taking the risk, I'm sure there'd be a lot of question, regret, doubt as to what it could have been. Right.
Yeah. Because I'd be kicking myself for not trying it.
So. That's really cool. And I think that, people need to hear that because there's a lot of people that'll watch this that are on the edge of, should I take the risk? Is it worth it? And I think, there is a piece to, if you don't, you don't know till you try.
Yeah.
And you might fail, but you said it, some of where you learned the most was from the failures. And so it's cool to hear, and it reinforces, I think, what a lot of people sometimes need to hear to take the leap. But I know this about you, but you mentioned it. You said, you're in the business, you've been in the business, you're doing the work, you're a doer, you've been doing it. But I also know that as of late, you've tried to kind of transition back a little bit, and you've got a good team in place. I do know that as well. And so maybe walk through that, going from, being the one doing everything to trying to kind of step back, even if it's a day a week or whatever that is, to where you're not doing, but kind of,
you got to have a lot of trust.
Yeah.
You got to find the right people, which was difficult. And then you got to have trust. I went from, and you'd remember this too, it's probably about 10 years ago, we were 6 or 7 employees to 40 employees practically overnight.
Wow. Yeah, it was quick.
I always say, no matter how hard you work in business, there's some luck involved too.
Oh, yeah.
And we had an account that it was during the 2007, 2008 housing, when everything went flat. We were working with Signal Security. They were just franchising at the time, and security was going up because whenever recession was, because people start breaking and stealing stuff more, they start increasing. And the way I started with that account was the owner walked in my door maybe a few years before that, and basically said, I'm starting a security company. I need some decals for the size of my Jeep. And 2 years later, he said, I'm going to franchise this place. And I said, yeah, whatever. And a year later was about 2007, 2008, whenever we were doing the first vehicles. And now just 2 years ago, we did 980 of them in a 1 year period because they changed their name.
And those are full wraps at this point,
100%
right?
on those, yeah. So we shipped out 600 or 700 worth and wrapped 300 or 400 in the shop and put them on transport trucks and shot them all over the United States. And
wow.
So
you probably didn't have that in the bingo card when you started.
No.
That wasn't in the business plan.
And that's where I say, I've stressed to my employees, we're at the point nowadays where we can't take on every single job out there. We have learned that, but you grow with your clients.
Yeah.
But back to it's just only been the last few years that I've, really started trying to take a step back and putting the right people in the right place. Yeah. What I found myself happening, though, unfortunately, is it gives me more time to do other things. And it's not other things for myself. It's other things for the business.
Yeah.
I still seem to find something to do. I'm one of those people, though, that I can't, on the weekends, I have to have a house project to work on. I can't just sit still. And so I still get involved, but I have enough really good employees that I can put trust in them. And I've went through a lot of bad employees to find those good employees.
Yeah.
And that's been very difficult. And we're still trying to find the right employees for everything. And
Challenge for everybody.
yeah. And I've also learned when you find the right employee and he's a good employee, do whatever you can do to hold on.
Yeah.
Don't take advantage. Don't take that for granted, because they may not be there tomorrow. So
yeah, that's the truth. I mean, it's any business anymore is a people business, and you got to have the right people for sure. So I love how you're talking about, or some of the themes I'm hearing is, failure is the best teacher. Does anything stick out in your mind over the years of one that, you would, at the time, you may have looked at as a big failure, or, something happened that you weren't anticipating, but ultimately you learned some valuable lesson or something that put you in a better spot moving forward? I mean, does anything come to mind that sticks out?
Well, probably one of our larger ones, and I won't get into names of companies or anything like that, is ironically one we were just talking about beforehand here on, we've learned how to, I wouldn't say we failed, but we lost money, not significantly, but enough, on a very large job, because we didn't understand how the gears worked in the thing. And it was a multi-layered contract job where we took on too much, basically. We agreed. They kept on asking us to add more to our load. We kept on agreeing to it. And then all of a sudden we basically had to do 6 months worth of work in 2 months. Oh. And the reason I wouldn't say we lost, but we weren't nearly as profitable, is because we ended up having to pull a lot of overtime. And if we were smarter about it, and we would have outlined our contracts better, that if this happens and this timeline doesn't happen on what we're outlining, there will be additional costs. We had nothing to stand back on. So we learned that in the past, but we learned it kind of recently, more so on really have all your T's dotted or crossing your I's dotted, or however they put that, to really make sure you're covered on that. But so much stuff is flying at you so quick, you forget to cover something on it. I can name all sorts of failures on, kind of the ongoing joke is when they say, "What do you guys do there?" And I say, it's easier to tell you what we don't do. And that's awnings. We attempted to start making our own awnings at one time, and we didn't have the right equipment. And we ended up, basically the entire job, we ended up having to outsource after we tried doing the whole thing ourselves. So we basically did it twice over. And we basically paid about $10,000 to do a job for a client, because that's about how much we lost when all was said and done. Wow. But you can never look at your business on individual jobs on which one's profitable and which one's not. You got to look at it as a whole and chalk some stuff up to a learning experience and move on.
Well, I mean, the awnings may not have worked out, right? But you mentioned it earlier, you're willing to consider taking on projects that might be unique. You're willing to take challenge. And like, as an example, wrapping 900 vehicles might not have been something that would have been a reality if you just said, no, that's a little outside of the scope of what we do right now, and passed on it.
Yeah. I think when I brought my vice president a couple of years ago, the ongoing joke with him, which was honestly true, is he's trying to teach me this word called no.
Yeah, I've heard him say that directly, actually. So I know that's true.
It's a tough one to learn as an entrepreneur, though.
Always, I've been around long enough, I guess, that if we don't know how to do it, we know somebody that can do it. But sometimes we get approached with something like, oh boy, okay, let's give it a try. And what we usually fail on those type of situations is we don't know enough about what we're getting ourselves into to charge enough, and then we're kind of stuck. But I always like to say we are not a perfect company. We do make mistakes, but we'll stand behind our work, and that's where we get burnt sometimes, because we do stand behind it. We're not just going to be like, so you hear these horror stories of somebody had their house drywalled and something didn't work right, and the guy will never come back, or never hear from him. We don't operate that way. We're gonna stand behind what we do and make
it's going to pay dividends in the long run anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the piece that you're referencing there is when you talk about dotting I's, crossing T's, is unfortunately, we all know this, the reality of handshake deals and stuff. I mean, those are things of the past. Everything's driven by contracts, and specifically in the trades, we just have to be very mindful of, what we're agreeing to and understanding it on the front end, or, we end up getting stuck with a project that gets away from us in a hurry. But
even I always thought email chains were good for, hey, here's what I told you. Nope, that's not good enough. I need it on a contract. And we've lost out on deals like that before because of that.
So we always like to ask this, and I know I have a feeling I know maybe how you're going to answer it, but you've done a lot of different things. When you think of like maybe the most exciting, cool project or type of work you guys do today, What is that?
Well, we have some exciting accounts. You know, I think one of our most fun accounts we have is we have the account with the NBA.
That's what I thought you might answer. Yes.
So basically, any basketball, NBA game, WNBA, the X League, there's several different things, and NCAA, any seat that the players are sitting on, the sleeve on the back of the seat is we do.
That's cool.
And that's a really, it's just neat because you see it.
Yeah.
We also do all the court graphics for sponsorship advertising. We don't do the actual team sports graphics because that's a union thing that we can't get into. And we acquired that company that it was back in COVID days. It was another company. Then they had that account and they've been around for 47, 48 years. And they had the account for over 30 years. And when COVID happened, obviously all the basketball, everything shut down and they had to shut the business down. And we were doing their overflow as it was. And the owner had passed away during COVID. The owner was 94 years old. And so I approached the heirs of the company, they were working there as well. They wanted to retire and convinced them to basically sell me the company. And we took one employee with it that was kind of handling it. So that one we've grown off of it since then with other sporting type things as well. We've had some fun projects. So we just recently did from cattle to cream for the Wisconsin State Fair for the Dairy Council, which was about a 50-foot long walk-through display with TV monitors. And it looked like a giant barn and totally custom, that we got basically a sketch from a cocktail napkin on what they were kind of envisioning and to develop it. We had to reach out to we have some partners that do some work that better than we do, or they're more specialized in it to assist on certain parts of the framework and what have you. But we get a lot of fun projects like that that are, it's fun just to look back, just sit back and look at what you did, I guess, basically, opposed to what I made on it. So,
I mean, it just is fascinating to think that like a company has to put the seat backs on the seat covers on the back of an NBA court that are advertising, and happens to be that you guys are the ones doing that, which is
somebody out of Omaha, Nebraska.
And it's interesting too, because it's the accounts with the NBA. We take orders from the teams. Like ironically, when I left today, they were printing a bunch of Harlem Globetrotter decals that were going out for some event. So it's kind of neat to see that. We've dealt with several, like the 3 on 3 tournament. I can't think what it's called.
It's on 3, isn't it?
With
I think that's what's
with Ice Cube and Snoop Dogg. So those are it's always interesting to have some stuff like that. Yeah. Our ongoing joke too with the NBAs, we asked, hey, did you know the playoffs are next week? And well, they didn't know because they just ordered 2,000 seat backs. What it is, they have to wait till they get the sponsors in. But it's always drop everything.
I'm sure.
And we have actually some of our machinery is there specifically for that account to keep up with the speed that we have to do it in.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which kind of like with the interesting challenges that we have a job that we just finished up right now that we were approached 2 days before a sponsor event. I won't go into detail who it was or what it was for, that they basically wanted 2,000 additional square foot of wall decorations or wall wraps, and we had less than 20 hours to print it, prep it, and install it. And so basically, the way I put it is like, imagine somebody comes in, bring somebody in your house and say, I want a custom wallpaper for every wall in my house. And by the way, I need it by tomorrow afternoon.
Jeez.
And so we're kind of geared up to do stuff like that. And it's kind of fun to pat ourselves on the back that we can pull off that. But we definitely don't advertise to people we do that because you spoil your clients.
Big disruption in your business.
But it's kind of fun to say, we can do that kind of stuff, or we've done that stuff before. So
wow,
but it makes it a few grumpy employees on occasion because they really get worked over whenever stuff like that happens. But we're dumb enough to say we'll do it.
Well, I think there's a theme in there too. We talk to a lot of founder-led businesses, and I think you hear that more of, we've probably have said yes too much, or, and still that's kind of deep within a lot of founders because when you started, you had to. Like, you had to keep the lights on. So you're taking on any job you can get that you think you can make some money on. And I think that just gets deeply ingrained in people, right? And but it's true too. I mean, and depending on the business, you do have to do that because some jobs you might, I'd imagine you can comment on this, but you might be wanting to build a long-term relationship with somebody. So maybe you go in and you do a job that, we probably wouldn't otherwise bid on that, but I think it could lead us to a better relationship. So there's always that chess match you're playing too when you're trying to think of, again, your business different than ours, where you're working on contract, working for other people, and things like that, which I always find is really interesting.
Yeah, we have clients that order anything from a $35 minimum job to a $100,000 job.
Yeah,
and
crazy.
I'll hear my employees complain, why are we doing this little $100 job? I'm like, you got to do that to get that job. And so yes, we will. Same for the signal security. If I was a larger company at the time and somebody walked in wanting 2 door decals, I might have blown them off. I wouldn't have, but somebody could have and said, yeah, we don't do that. Go see this guy down the street. 7 years later, you might be kicking yourself for missing out on what they ultimately came to be too.
I know, it's so hard. It's so hard. We deal with it all the time because you can't look at it on an individual account basis. And that's ultimately where it goes to sometimes, because you look at, the number of hours you put in and the amount of money, but it is, you don't always see the kind of extenuating tentacles that a new account can bring in, but it can also be, there's a dark side to that too. You can't do too many of them where you don't get the bigger account or whatnot. So it's a balancing act. I mean, that's kind of the fun part about being in business is there's 100,000 different ways to do it. And, we're all going to approach it different and try different things. And, on that, I wanted to make sure we hit on, you kind of talked about the fun projects you've been on. Take us back to a challenge in the business that, you really sticks out to you as something you guys were able to overcome, or, maybe it's something today that you're looking at, a challenge coming up that, you're working through.
I guess one that kind of sticks out to me, it's more of a growth type situation, but it was 6 or 7 years ago. I should know the date, but I don't. It was when Children's Hospital added a wing to the hospital. We somehow got hold of the bid package, and it was a pretty large package of ADA wayfinding signs. We didn't do ADA wayfinding signs, but we knew somebody that did do them, a wholesale provider. So let's bid it. Let's see what happens. And somehow we ended up with the job. And that was probably the first time I ever done a job with a large architect, large construction company. And so we went to meet them for the first meeting, and they hand us what the signs look like. And we're like, this is not what we bid. Like, we realized that what we put out was more of a baseline design, and then we choose the company from there. And then now you're allowed to do up to 40% increase on the price because it's a much more complex sign. So we went back to the wholesale provider, said, hey, we need you to rebid this, and they doubled the price on us. And so we went back to the architect and says, we can't do it at the 40%. They said, well, we're going to have to find somebody else then that will do it for that price. And so hang on, let me see what we can figure out. So we huddled up and said, well, I guess we're going to learn how to do ADA signs ourselves. And so we went out and bought a little desktop ADA printing machine. It was real new technology. Most of your typical ADA signs, and I'm probably boring the heck out of people in layman's terms and stuff, or non-layman's terms, but the typical way ADA is done is it's a little engraver that cuts out all the shapes and pieces and drills holes and puts the braille balls into it and everything like that. And there was new technology just coming out where it was a machine that was actually printing layers of ink to do raised tactile print. And it was kind of like a 3D printer, basically. So it was a little desktop version with like, hey, okay, let's invest in this and do the job. And so we got the machine in real quick because we had like a 6-month period before we had to start building anything. So we got in, got set up, got running. We found out that with this machine, we were able to produce about 20 to 30 signs a day, and there was 6,000 signs we had to do for this job. So about 2 weeks into it, said, this isn't going to work. And we kind of looked at where we're going to be standing with our profits on the job once all said and done. And we went out and bought a large machine. And we knew we weren't going to lose money, but when it was all said and done, we would have the equipment and everything in place to do future jobs. Yeah. But we would make nothing on the job because we were going to take every single penny of profit and invest in this equipment. And I basically pulled my employees in my office when we were just getting into it. I said, here's the deal. I don't care if we lose money on this job. This is our foot in the door to continue doing work like this. It's a real niche. Nobody in Omaha is really doing it in-house. They're all outsourcing like we were. So let's get it right and get on the good side of the architect and the builder, and let's see what else we can get. And it just took off from there, where while we were doing the job, the architect was recommending other companies to try us out because we were doing a unique product, and they started to spec their stuff that way. And now we're showing up on their list whenever the bids go out. We're listed as a manufacturer of that particular type of sign. So it was quite the stressor on. It was probably the largest account we ever had at the time. It was a $500,000 account, and the only fortunate thing was it was a government grant, and I've never seen this before. We signed the contract and the check showed up for the entire amount before we had anything. And I didn't want the money because it was right at the end of the year. And I'm like, I don't have any expenses to put against this check. And so luckily with some creative accounting of our accountant, we were able to basically put it aside in a different account without actually, I wouldn't say not claiming it. It wasn't cashed until the beginning of the year, and we were able to roll it into the next year. But then we immediately started spending it and buying all the equipment to keep up, to make this account work and everything. And I had some very nervous nights of thinking in my head, oh my goodness, what if they don't approve this, how we're doing this, or what, we put all this money into it, and we took quite the risk on doing that. And that's probably how one part of my business that really blossomed because of that. I would never been able to convince a bank to let me borrow money for something like that. And so we were lucky because they pay us in advance, and we just took the chance because, and it paid off, in the long run. So
so one of the biggest challenges, it turns into a big opportunity once you figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty cool.
That's so, all right. All of the things we've talked about that have happened kind of over the course of time for you. Fast forward to today. What keeps you up at night when it comes to the business? Like, what is the one, I mean, I know there's a hand, but like, is there a particular thing at this stage in the business, in your life, in your career that like just kind of weighs on you? Or is there not? Maybe there's not.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I am naturally a worrywart is my problem. And so I get worked up probably more than I should on things. But probably ironically nowadays, what stresses me the most is I want to make sure my employees are taken care of, they have work, and we don't have to send them home.
Yeah, that's awesome.
When you have 40 employees, which isn't very big compared to a lot of companies, but we have 6 different departments that we specialize in different things. It's very important. We have to cross train them because one department's going to hold the other one up during certain times of the year when they aren't busy. I get very stressed out if there's not enough work for everybody. Because we always have, one of our departments is always swamped, and then we have one that's kind of not much to do. And I truly do really care about our employees and making sure it's kind of, I guess it's somewhat selfish too, because I know if I keep on telling them, well, go home early, they're eventually going to go find a job that they don't have to go home early at. So that's, and then you can piggyback off of that, where the other stress is finding good employees and keeping good employees, more so because our industry is very unique. And going back to what we were talking about earlier with college and everything like that, there needs to be more trade schools out there for our type of industries. It's very difficult, because we have guys that are certified welders, we have guys that are 85 foot up in the air, lift trucks, and then we have graphic designers, and we have PhDs in there that are the project management. So we have all realms, but the one thing we have the toughest time finding is skilled labor. And we get a lot of people that say they're skilled labor, and we find out within a week or two that they're very good story makers. Tellers is what they are. They don't know what they're doing though. So that stresses me out a lot on, knowing we have something come up and we don't have the right staff in place to fulfill it, or we're going to really work over some of our employees that do have the right skill to do it. So
I think literally everybody watching or listening to this is going to echo that sentiment, because it's not unique to you. It's across
the board.
It is. Yeah. But something you said in there, it becomes self-fulfilling a little bit, in that because you care at your core about your people, keeping them busy, keeping them engaged. And we talk a lot in our business about the stakeholders. So not only is it the people that work for you, but it's their families that are relying on the business, relying on a paycheck. It's the communities they serve. It's their friends. It gets really, the tentacles go far. But when you're doing that, even as challenging as it is, it becomes naturally easier to attract people, because people feel that. They feel it in the culture. People want to work for a company like that. So while it's challenging for you, it's probably exponentially more challenging for companies that don't have that mindset, because they don't have the recruiting of their team. They don't have that feel and that culture that does attract people to want to come work for a company that's.
It helps too when you're out there long enough that people know who you are, and where we start getting applicants that are coming from other companies, which is a difficult thing for us because we work with 80-90% of the sign companies in town.
Yeah, that's
when
a
one
unique
of their
spot to
employees
be.
shows up, wants a job, I'm like,
You gotta be a little careful.
I kind of do work for your boss, and I don't know if I should be taking you, you know, and so we've had some awkward situations because of that as well, where we've had to pass on even entertaining hiring an employee because it would damage our relationship with the client ultimately. And we've had to tell some, well, why don't you go ahead and quit? And then come see me in a few weeks, and we'll see if we can get something to work, which is kind of not a very good way of doing business either. And I'm pretty honest where I'll call the owner and say, hey, this guy's standing in my shop right now. What's going on here? You know? And so, but that's been a challenge all itself. One thing I have been a little smart on, I haven't been so dumb that we've never ran a line of credit with the company. If we can't afford it, I'm not going to stretch us out, because I know a lot of business owners, that's what their biggest worry is. Are they going to be able to eat the next day? I mean, you know, for the first 10, 15 years, that was stressful. But when we got to the point now where, ironically, we just told our bank, quit renewing our line of credit. We've never used it, and we're paying you $500 to renew it for something we aren't even using. They always say it's best time to get credit is when you have when you don't need it. But we've set ourselves up in such a sense that, you know, we just came to the conclusion that it's not worth running yourself so high in debt that you're paycheck to paycheck, I guess, basically. If we get to that point, then I know I have a problem on my hands. So
it's a good spot to be.
Well, Chuck, it's been great. We've been going for a while. Is there anything we didn't hit on that, you know, is on your mind of things as you look back over your career that, you know, you think would be helpful or fun to chat about?
Well, I think the only I can go on about things I've learned and different stories. I think for me personally, I've told this to many people who are just starting up. Do it because you love what you're doing. Don't do it because you think you're going to make a bunch of money. You hear the old saying, do what you love and the money will follow. And I don't even know if that's true. But, you know, you have to be persistent. There's so many, I've seen so many businesses give up that if they wouldn't have given up, they probably would have made it. You know, that you go through some rough times and you just throw your hands up. That was, you know, I can think hundreds of times over where you know, money was tight, or we had issues with employees, you name it, where it would have been easy just to walk. I'm ignorant when it comes, I hate quitting. And so I keep on trying, but it has paid off over the time. But it really goes back to, I really think it's just the neatest thing. I can drive. No matter where I drive in town, I can see work that we've done, because you know, I pretty much every block I've been on, any strip mall, you name it, there's something in there that we've done, and so it's kind of neat to say, "Yep, I did that." And so do it for pride, and do it because you enjoy it, not just looking. I know there's some people out there that look for, okay, what's the best thing to make the most money in, but they have no interest in that area. You'll never succeed in the long run, is my opinion on something like that. So.
Well, it's funny you say that as we close out. And for people listening to this, that's what's so cool about construction, the trades, is what you just said, is there's this tangible element that it's like you can point at and say, we did that, or I did that.
So true.
And like we have this arm's length in our business of where we can say, our client did that, because I do that. I mean, I know the projects because you specifically told me about certain things over time, and I'll be driving by Children's Hospital. I'm like, I know that was Chuck's, you know, and it's a cool, like some of those are really cool kind of iconic, you know, images and such. And so that's, I think for everybody that listens, one of the things that you should really be proud of and embrace in those moments when stuff gets hard and you're grinding for, why am I going to continue to do this, is remind yourself that at some point it's pretty cool to be able to sit back and say, I put my fingerprint, and you literally get to say, I put my fingerprint on this entire city. And that's a pretty cool thing to say. So
that's
congratulations to that. Yeah, it's been fun to watch you grow. It's been fun to be along the journey. And as I hear the stories about like the 88s, I know the things that have come up along the way, but sometimes I don't know all the detail behind it. So hearing it right now is kind of fun. But yeah, I mean, I certainly enjoyed it. I think people are going to be able to take away a lot of things from listening. But yeah, unless there's anything else
appreciate
you want to add on your point. Yeah, appreciate you having on. And
I think we covered everything, and kind of what you said, I'll tout that right back. one thing I did kind of miss on a little bit is when you find a good company to work with, stick with them. And with kind of like with working with you guys, I'm sure I could find somebody cheaper out there, but the relationships that you build and the extra links they'll go to you for, and you've gone out of your way for stuff for us that if I was just finding the cheapest person out there, I wouldn't do it. And, so I think loyalty is a very important thing in the world with your vendors, your clients, you name it. If you're constantly price shopping, you're never going to get anywhere on that. I've learned that the hard way too.
Well, sometimes we all do, but no, we appreciate that. We echo the sentiment. Our relationships are everything in our business, and certainly everybody watching this, Elliot said it earlier, people and relationships are everything, and they still will be long into the future, regardless of where business goes. So appreciate that. Thanks, man. That was fun.
Yeah, it's great. See everybody next time.